Hello! In this video, we will explore the benefits that interdisciplinary education and learning can provide to educational practice in general and how its application can help strengthen students' learning outcomes and their abilities for lifelong learning. We will also consider how interdisciplinary approaches can be practically applied in teaching. But first, to understand the role of interdisciplinary learning in education, we must consider the role that the disciplines play in guiding and governing current education systems, and how disciplinary-based education has gained this role. For this, we must briefly look back at the foundations of the disciplines and the establishment of the epistemological tradition, also known as the scientific method. Here we must turn to the work of René Descartes in the 17th century. Descartes is often credited with setting the course for Western science and research, based around the division of disciplines and distinct fields of study. From the Cartesian dualism on the separation between the mind and body, to its application in scientific rationality and deductive reasoning, Cartesian philosophy shaped the development of distinct disciplines during the Age of Enlightenment. It was in his work, Discourse on the Method, published in 1637, that Descartes laid out this approach: to divide the problem studied into parts, start with the simplest, proceed to the more complex on that basis, have a final look to check that nothing has been forgotten. This rational and linear approach to knowledge generation is based on dividing, or atomizing things into their smallest parts, so that they can each be observed and studied individually, without influence from one another. The Cartesian philosophy must be credited for achieving great advancements in human knowledge, as these separate disciplines developed and formed their own systems and rules for investigation and knowledge production. But it has also created certain limitations in the way that we look at the world. Applied to the human body, anatomy may become the study of parts, from simple to complex, checking that nothing is left out. But humans are more than the sum of their parts. We must consider the role of relationships, as well as the mind, spirit, values, and ethics that all impact on our being. Applied to space, geography may become the study of states or regions, but not of the complex relationships between them, like imperialism, colonialism, or exploitation. Applied to time, history may become the study of epochs, but not of the connections or evolutions between these different eras, the grand view of societal development, or the macro history. Furthermore, as disciplines have developed and become increasingly specialized, there has been a corresponding professionalization of knowledge into distinct fields. This feature simultaneously distinguishes a unique area of study while also protecting those specialists from outside critique by establishing specific rules, language, and methodology that serve to reinforce the boundaries and validity of individual disciplines. This has grown out of a desire to better explore, investigate, and understand the world around us. But as professor of physics at Harvard University, Dr. John Huth cautions, sadly, we often atomize knowledge into pieces that don't have a home in a larger conceptual framework. When this happens, we surrender meaning to guardians of knowledge and it loses its personal value. It is the counterpoint to this critique from which the value of interdisciplinary education is illuminated. That is, the ability to nurture and develop a unifying or overarching conceptual framework for meaning-making. At the core of interdisciplinary education and learning is this goal: to facilitate learners in developing their own knowledge constructs and frameworks for learning that bring context and meaning to their education, while also collaboratively discussing and deliberating on common worldviews and paradigms of understanding. This, in turn, is of central importance to enhancing the overall quality and relevance of education, as well as for the learner's development of skills for lifelong learning. But if we understand this focus on an overarching conceptual framework for meaning making as a central component of interdisciplinary education, then how can we begin to apply this in educational settings? Let's start by considering a standard approach that is used to engage students to collaborate in interdisciplinary education, albeit a weak version of what we are discussing here. This may start with a few different subject teachers wanting to engage and collaborate on a teaching module. A common issue or topic relevant to all subjects is selected for the focus of collaboration. Each teacher develops his or her own subject-based investigation into this topic. By bringing together the perspectives from different subjects, the students can gain a more comprehensive and pluralistic understanding of the topic, as well as appreciating the different types of knowledge that each subject can provide in relation to the given topic. For the subjects, though, the focus often remains on addressing the topic through subject-based competencies. As such, there is little effort made to integrate the knowledge or perspectives from the different subjects into a common framework. And if any form of integrated learning is to be achieved, then the burden for doing this is often solely placed on the students rather than on the teachers. This approach towards subject collaboration is more properly referred to as multidisciplinary education. So let us now consider what happens when the focus of interdisciplinary learning is based on an overarching conceptual framework, which initially can be as simple as investigating the complex interconnections that occur within different systems and how the different parts interact and influence its overall functioning. Within such an interdisciplinary framework, we acknowledge that subject-based learning evolves from this common framework and that there are overlapping knowledge areas between subjects that can enhance the overall learning experience. By designing teaching to work with this common framework, we also strengthen a focus on applied learning and the practical testing and application of new knowledge within real-world context. From this central starting point, the learning extends out into the different subjects, exploring common themes or issues from multiple perspectives and applying different pedagogical approaches and modes of investigation to bring greater depth to the learning process. This approach enables an active interplay between the interdisciplinary framework and the subject-based competencies. Learners are able to draw on specific knowledge, perspectives, and methods from different subjects to enrich and strengthen their interdisciplinary understanding in a way that facilitates subject-based relevance and depth learning. This in turn provides the potential for expanding on and further elaborating the interdisciplinary framework as a central construct for meaning-making and understanding. By emphasizing the shared role of all subjects in competency development and the facilitation of lifelong learning skills, it is possible to increase the benefits that an interdisciplinary framework brings to students' learning achievement and outcomes. With this type of common interdisciplinary framework in place, it also becomes possible to increase the number of subjects involved within such interdisciplinary learning approaches. The aim of an interdisciplinary framework is not to reject the value that individual subjects bring to education, nor undermine their importance, but rather, it is to focus on the experience of the active learner and how to increase the quality and impact that these subjects have on her overall learning. This requires an active interplay between the subjects and the common interdisciplinary framework. By initiating educational design with this common framework as a central starting point, we can bring greater relevance and meaning to subject-based learning. In turn, subject-based learning is reapplied through experiential learning, praxis, and critical reflection towards the expansion and elaboration of the interdisciplinary framework. As the subject-based contributions become grounded in this common framework, It enables learning cycles to develop through interaction between the interdisciplinary framework and the subject competencies, thus contributing to the enhancement of this framework. This creates a dynamic interplay for active and applied learning, in which the expanding conceptual framework both provides greater synergies between and across subjects and supports the development of enriched constructs and procedures for meaning-making as the foundation for interdisciplinary learning. Now, let us briefly consider the importance of real-world relevance in applied learning as fundamental features of quality education. For this, we must consider a transdisciplinary learning approach. Here, the important point is that the common interdisciplinary framework is not framed only within an educational context, but that it also reflects on and incorporates key aspects from wider society, as demonstrated here in purple. The relevance of learning can be enhanced by incorporating students as active participants in planning their learning activities and defining their learning outcomes. By using formative assessment, we can identify issues of importance for students in their daily lives and in their wider communities. And by focusing education on these real-world issues, we can increase opportunities for students to actively apply learning to their daily lives and to utilize their lifelong learning skills in meaningful and productive ways. It is also possible to incorporate other stakeholders or their perspectives into this transdisciplinary approach. Collaboration with stakeholders can be done to identify key issues, define desired learning outcomes, or to investigate different dimensions of a selected issue. Working with stakeholders also requires students to recognize different needs and concerns, respect differing views and opinions, and solve problems with a focus on win-win solutions. All of which provide essential tools for collaborative learning and social change. Transdisciplinary learning thus elevates the interplay between the conceptual learning framework and wider social values, norms, and worldviews in a way that encourages processes of transformative learning. This also serves to enhance the role that education plays in social forming, as it is related to the German concept of Bildung and the Nordic concept of Dannelse. Now we have covered the approaches towards interdisciplinary education, but you may be wondering, what are the key features of the overarching framework that has been discussed? This framework is oriented towards learning processes, how we view and investigate the world around us, how we structure our thinking and codify knowledge, and how we connect different pieces of knowledge into a larger construct and make meaning of it. This framework is not as concerned with a specific focus on individual knowledge items or prescribed views, opinions, values, or ethics. Ideally, the interdisciplinary framework facilitates the development of learners' skills and competencies for lifelong learning, but at the same time allows for the application of both these learning competencies and the overarching framework towards understanding and working with a diverse range of unique topics and areas of study. As such, we find the following key features or principles underscoring an interdisciplinary learning approach: pluralistic education and appreciation of multiple perspectives, different forms of investigation and variation in pedagogical approaches, acceptance of multiple relevant paths to knowledge and meaning-making, active, engaged learners and student-centered learning, collaborative learning, group dialogue, and deliberation, holistic approaches to understanding and use of systems thinking, examining the relationships and interconnections within systems, problem solving focused on achieving win-win solutions for all, and practical and applied learning working with real-world issues. Now, I would like to briefly share an example of a learning activity that captures this perspective towards developing a holistic interdisciplinary framework. For this, I would like to introduce the action project approach, which engages students in real-world investigation, action research, and change initiatives. This is a learning approach that can be easily scaled and adapted for relevance for learners at all ages. Furthermore, this is an approach that can actively engage learners across the planning, design, execution, and evaluation of these activities. While this learning approach can be applied to many different interdisciplinary topics, we find that it is a particularly valuable approach for engaging with issues of sustainability. Utilizing the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as a starting point, the 17 SDGs serve as an entry to identifying the complex socio-ecological challenges that must be addressed. Students are challenged to identify a sustainability issue or challenge that they see as important in their own communities. Depending on the scale of this activity, students may either choose one issue to focus on as a class, or they may work in small groups on individual topics. Students must plan and design their own investigation process for better understanding the complexities around the chosen issue. They then engage in a period of real-world research, which often includes interviews and discussions with different key stakeholders. And they aim to develop a robust set of data for better understanding the situation. It is also possible to connect the students with different experts to enhance the research methods and investigation skills. Different group members will share and present the findings from the research they have conducted, and the group will work together to synthesize their common understanding. Next, the students must critically and creatively reflect on different opportunities and solutions to improve the situation. They will develop and test different actions that can support more sustainable practices or pathways. Students should document their actions and present their results. It also is possible for students to organize a community forum where they present their findings and suggestions back to stakeholders and community members, with an overall aim for supporting collective dialogue and decision-making on ways forward. The action project approach allows students to actively engage in investigating and gaining insights into complex societal challenges, to navigate dilemmas and conflicts, to find solutions through collaboration and identifying new knowledge, and to develop their own action competencies through applied learning. Throughout this process, the facilitation of critical reflection, experiential learning, and group evaluation all help to enhance the value of these learning activities. And in doing so, it also strengthens learners' consideration of how they can apply their new learning and competency development to different situations and future actions. Thank you, and good luck in your efforts on interdisciplinary education.